And my name is Yalla.
And we have another yellow over there.
Yeah, yellow.
And my name is Juan.
So historically how these have worked, based on the previous one, which is the entire history of this type of thing, is people ask questions and then we try and make answers up. Or give or give the correct answer if we know it. You can ask any questions suitable for a public discussion, but I'll leave that up to your discretion what you ask. So these go really boring if no one asks any questions. We just sit up here for 30 minutes like doofuses.
So if I have a Cake application that I would like to take mobile and utilize the HTML5 offline or local storage, would you have any kind of suggestions or experience of working with that, or what kind of process should I pursue?
If you're doing a lot of the HTML5 offline stuff, you want to look at what browsers you're targeting and what features you need to use. So it depends on your application, right? Be careful with application cache, as it's very tricky and it's very temperamental. I would be very cautious about using application cache for everything, because the way the manifest works, it's just a really kind of thorny, tricky thing to get right. It seems really easy until you try using it and trying to like push an update and then have the application cache refresh, and then it gets all hairy on you. But using local storage and the local index DB or the local SQLite DB is pretty good, and then you just have to figure out how to push that back up to the server, which is also, again, depends on the application, depends on what you're storing and how you need to synchronize, because there's going to be conflicts, so you have to prepare for conflict resolution. It's actually kind of hard. It depends on the application though. Like if it's an email, like you can just store the emails locally, and then when you get network connectivity, you can push them back up. But if it's like, you know,
It's 90% read, 10% write.
well, offline read's really not that much fun. There's not much to read. So you can either try prefetching a lot of the content and storing it locally. Yeah. There's no real generic solution. I would be careful with application cache, though. I found that to be really painful to use in the past. Anyone else? Do you want to introduce yourself?
I'm Larry Masters.
Any other questions? Endo has questions.
So I would know why the Debug Kit stays separated from core. So I would Debug Kit as part of core. So do you have any plan for that?
One of the reasons that it's separate from the core is we try to keep the core as lean as possible. With the new plugin server that we have, that little Jose had created. That's what we're going to start using to push out a lot of our plugin releases, that are the ones that are maintained by the CakePHP Core, and then also ones that are available through individual developers. There's going to be some talks tomorrow that kind of go over, you know, the plugins in more detail, and then our distribution of those. So trying to keep the core as lean as possible is one of the things that we want to do. Anyone else have anything to add?
I like keeping them separate just because then the release cycles can be separate, which is one nice thing. And we don't, if there's a bug in Debug Kit, you don't have to wait for the next release of Cake in order to get an upgrade for Debug Kit, and vice versa. Like if there's a bug in Cake, you don't have to upgrade Debug Kit just because they're all bundled together. It's kind of a pain that they're separate, but it's also nice that they're separate in that if you have an application where you don't want one, or you don't want to have to turn it on, then you don't have to. Yeah.
No, I was going to say the same thing, but I think that we can do a better work at publicizing the plugin. Maybe put it on the first time you bake an app. Say, hey, you didn't have debug installed. You want me to do that for you? Or something like that.
It'd be good to do that with any other plugins that might be useful once we
Yeah.
put them and list them on the
Yes.
We also had We also had plans to update the schema shell and the migrations plugin from CakeDC to integrate it better into the core. So I don't know if it will stay a separate plugin or it will stay separate. Yeah, well, that's one we should promote also on fresh installs.
Anyone else?
Good question, though, Andrew. Thank you. I don't know if I need a mic or not. I can project.
This is so people that are watching the stream can hear.
Oh, the stream. Yes. We don't want to forget the stream people.
You have projection.
I do have projection.
So I know there's a huge religious battle going on right now between full-fledged frameworks and micro frameworks. Do you guys consider yourself making maybe a cupcake in the future?
Well, we can't take the name Cupcake because someone already stole that. They used it as a fork. They forked cake and then they didn't do anything with it, but they called their project Cupcake, so we can't take that name. But we can probably find some other clever name if we want to do that. I'm not totally against it. Micro frameworks are interesting. They have their use cases. The most useful way to make a micro framework is just take out the ORM, and then boom, you have a micro framework because now it doesn't do much. So it just does routing and basic controller logic. So yeah, we could make a micro framework. I've tried a few times to like jam anonymous functions into the router, and everyone else says no each time. So that's, yeah, it's probably something we could look at, but I don't know if there's no definite plans for it right now. I don't have any, at least.
I wouldn't put that on the top of our list. CakePHP, it's a full stack framework. There's nothing stopping you from using components from other frameworks within a CakePHP application. That's the way it was built from the beginning, is to be extendable, whether you want to do it within, writing your own CakePHP plugin or using another library. Drop it in the vendors directory, have access to what's needed. We could improve that. I see no need for really separating anything. If it's the size of a download or how much space it's going to take up on your hard drive, get a bigger hard drive.
On the subject of having a micro framework within CakePHP, I actually one time took apart the router classes that we have and just stripped out everything that we had in the controllers and all that view stuff and just shoved everything into special router classes. So I had a middleware router class that then shoved in middleware, and I just called a model method directly and then returned results. And it just completely skipped all of the controller and view stuff. So you could do it right now, you just would still have all of the baggage from the rest of the framework.
You already started in one, just for fun. Right after I built the dispatcher filters for CakePHP 2.2, I realized that that was the entry point for doing a micro framework. So I started creating, just for fun, a plugin that just skips everything else and just dispatches a view. But I'm not very keen on micro frameworks. I think they have the uses, but I've never wanted to use one. I've never found the actual reason for using one. If I want to do a simple web page, I can just use normal CakePHP views. It's fast enough. I don't want extreme performance for a simple app because that's not what simple apps are for. So it's not on the top of my list. I just did it to prove that it was possible to do that with CakePHP. But I think CakePHP should stay a full stack framework. Yes, we need to decouple some classes so people can use them as they want, but it should remain to its original principles.
Another fun, tricky thing with micro frameworks is that they're not always so micro. Like, if you look at like Silex even, it's quite huge inside. Like, it's a few megabyte download to just Silex, and it's a micro framework, like it doesn't have an ORM, but it's using almost every Symfony component, which makes it not so micro. And it's actually slower than Symfony, so like I don't know how he did that. He's a wizard. Yeah, so some micro frameworks aren't so micro. There are other ones like Slim that are actually, there's not much to them, so they're more micro. But even in Python, like Flask is small, but WorkZug is huge. So yeah, micro framework is kind of a cheat in some ways. I think, I don't know.
You can start doing the question and we can repeat it for you, Mike. Okay.
It's kind of the same topic. In Cake 3.0, what parts are you going to decouple and what's your thinking behind that? Because there's lots of opportunities to decouple it in tons of different ways. You could decouple it to be able to do things like micro frameworks. You could decouple, for example, the whole model thing and even release that as its own repository. But what sort of approach are you taking on the decoupling of Cake 3.0?
So the question was, how are we planning to decouple, in 3.0, how are we planning to decouple the library? And what parts are we going to decouple? Like, are we going to separate out just the ORM or just separate out some other components, and which ones are we planning to do? So I'll let Jose answer.
With me. Okay, so we already started the task of identifying what components or what parts, what libraries of the framework depend on each other. And we're trying to make those parts as much cohesive as possible. So I don't see KPHP being a list of submodules linking to each other. I think that's not the goal of our project. But we do plan to make each component that were already planned for KPHP 2.0, each of the packages that you see, each of the folders should be self-contained and only perhaps depend on a few classes from core KPHP, such as configure class, maybe cache, and maybe, I don't know, lock app, of course, app because it's a class loader. So those other packages will only depend on the core package, and due to the magic of PHP namespaces, you would be able to just have those packages in your system with the core KPHP package and just use them right away. So to answer the question, each of the packages that we have already in 2.0 will be as much as possible self-contained, but I don't see them being submodules or separate projects, because I think that just creates a hassle of maintenance, and I don't know. What do you think?
Well, even if they're all in the same repo, we could do the same thing that like Zen Framework has taken, where they've made multiple composer packages or they've made multiple pair packages out of one repo. Like you can always go through a larger repo and just generate multiple pair packages out of it with meta packages, so that when you install, like even with Zen Framework too, like when you install the ZF2 framework, you actually install a meta package that installs 100 other well, it's not 100, but many other packages. And the same is with Symfony 2, where you install Symfony and it installs all the components, but then they also split out every component to be a separate package as well. So we could probably take the same approach with Cake, where it's one repository with all of the pieces, and then we split it out. But like Jose said, I'd really like to get it to the point where there's just the one core package that's a dependency for all of the other main packages. So like the model system would be, you get that as a piece, or you can get just the view layer as a piece. Yeah, I don't like the idea of separate repos. It makes it hard for the community to contribute, because they have to find the right repo and then fork that and then send a pull request, and then it's get merged into the master repo.
And that still works with the main repo.
Yeah, if it's all one repo, it's a little bit easier for everyone to manage. And we don't have to go around and break everyone's clones right now, which kind of sucks if we were to go and do that.
Also, another thing, like Larry said, it's a full stack framework. So what you can do is you get the framework. You don't need to use the framework, but you can extend the class. So like we need to do is make easy to extend the classes, so you can extend, change how you use the configuration or how you use anything else, and then use the base stuff on the class you want. So basically you don't need the framework, but you can extend it for your good.
Yeah, when CakePHP was first started, the way that you would override what the core itself does, you would do everything within your app directory. And it's still the case now. You can override anything that's in the CakePHP core, whether it's the main data source and the database drivers, all of those can be overridden, and you could actually write any type of wrapper you want to have it return the data the way that you want to. I don't see that changing much except what he was saying, making it easier to extend the core instead of just completely overriding what is there. There's ways that you can trick the core to do anything you want. It just takes a little bit of digging into it. And that's not useful for everybody all the time.
Does that answer your question at all? Okay. Thanks. It was a good question.
Anyone else?
More generally, what plans do you have for Cake 3 and why? What kind of benefits are going to give?
So for those at home, the question was, what are the general plans for 3.0 and why are we making those plans? Is that correct? Yeah, okay. Just want to make sure I didn't forget anything. I'll start, I guess. So one of the biggest plans is to move to 5.4. One of the reasons for that is we're pretty sure we won't be done this year. Pretty sure. And 5.4 is already at 5.4.3 or 5.4.4. 6?
That actually broke some stuff, so don't upgrade.
Okay, so skip 6, it's 11. So 5.4.5. So by the time we get around to releasing, we'll be at 5.4.10. Which means probably a lot of hosts will have been upgraded to 5.4.1, 5.4.2. It's true, there's always a little bit of a delay. You can already get 5.4 on the Azure stuff. You can probably already get 5.4 on Orchestra IO. So we're assuming that a lot of hosts, we're going to shoot a little farther in the future and hope that we land at the same place that where the hosting is at that time. It's a bit of a gamble, but we're hoping that it pays off. So that's one reason. One of the other biggest changes is we're probably I think that's the biggest one. Oh, revamping the model system. That's been a long time coming. We've had the current model API has worked almost exactly the same from 1.1 to now. So it's lived a life. It's a village elder now, and we need to. The times have changed, really. Like, it's really originally the model API was built around certain limitations in PHP 4. Those are no longer problems. Like constructing hundreds of objects was a huge bottleneck. It's not really as bad anymore. So we can build a new replacement that fits more with modern kind of ideas around ORMs and kind of hopefully replace some of that. Oh yeah, routing. Oh fuck, I hate that thing. I've rewritten that thing like 2 or 3 times now. That one's not really changing, like breaking changes. It's more getting a lot more modular, I think. So. Oh yeah, configuration. Yeah. Yeah.
What they're saying is that we'll try to make as much effort as possible to have a migration path from old applications as possible. But you need to keep in mind that we're replacing the model layer, which is kind of the center of any application, where your data is and how you manage your data is everything. To expand on the model layer changes, we're gonna use a more object-oriented approach. We'll try to support as much drivers as possible, both PDO and both native. We'll try, or it's actually already in progress and it's kind of working, to support multiple types of columns in the database. For example, from big int to UUID in Postgres, or inet, or whatever random thing that you can think of in a database, we'll try to support it. Or even complex data from PHP be exported to database automatically, like having an array type. So automatically the type class would serialize the data for you and store it in a text field or something like that. We'll also try to create a query builder. Will be kept as similar as possible as the current one in CakePHP, which uses arrays, but also that offers an object-oriented approach where you can build programmatically using a Fluent API, a query, and that you can lazily fetch the result, that you can build a query, but if nothing uses in the application that query at all because you have some sort of caching, then it doesn't send the request to the database. So it just fetches the thing as much late as possible. We also plan to make models not the table representation or the class representation for the table, but the class representation for the row, and have another class that represents the table. So you can choose between both. You can have some functions in the class representing the table for custom finds, custom queries, custom whatever, and you can have the model level for rows where you can manage, for example, if you want to get the full name of a user, but you only have the first name and last name in database, you can have a method to combine those together in a class, which is possible right now, but it's kind of a pain in the ass because you need to traverse all the results that came from the database and do that every time. And in this other approach, you would do that only when you request the object to do the concatenation of the results, which is obviously going to take some time. Apart from that, we have nothing else planned. Of course, we'll try to use the PHP 5.4 features as wise as possible. It's not like, oh, we have so much features, we have to use them in everything, which happened to another framework. And for example, we'll try to use traits, but not like crazy. We already found a few spots where traits make sense. For example, we could convert behaviors or part of the behaviors to traits, and we came up with this idea of bake producing traits. So you can, a trait will produce the index, add, view, edit, but if you want to add another feature to your controller, like, well, this model should, or this controller should add like a list. Like if you have a list of tickets on a system, it also should have move up, move down, move to functions. So you can bake them as a trait and add them to multiple controllers at the same time. We already have some traits in 3.0 in the model layer, actually the database layer, where it made sense. For example, we have this connection object, and we want to use the same connection object for both the native drivers and for PDO drivers. But we cannot make the native drivers extend a PDO class. So we have both type of classes extending connection, but only PDO uses the PDO trait. So we have only those methods that are specific to PDO using a trait.
We have on Google Groups CakePHP Core, or Core CakePHP, I don't know which one.
KPHP-core.
This Core. There is a list. There's a list of 3.0 changes, and they're open for discussion. So join the group and comment on the post.
Yeah, to that end, like we don't have everything planned. If you have something that you think is really important and something that would make the applications you're building a lot easier, and you think can be used in a general like a general use case, then definitely suggest it. Like we don't have all the answers. We won't lie, we don't. It's going to change. Like as we're building the framework, input from the community is a big way of how we learn what people are doing and what is actually required. So the more involvement we have and the more knowledge we know about how people are using Cake and what they're using it for can help us inform the decisions to what we build. Are you talking?
Like Mark said, we're a community-based framework. Yeah, there's a select few who are in charge of maintaining the core itself, but we wouldn't be here after how many years have been set? 7 years. We wouldn't have been doing this for 7 years if we didn't have our community behind us. So, you know, I thank everybody for that. You know, if it wasn't for you guys using the framework, sending us suggestions on what you want to see, and then jumping on us when it doesn't work the way you wanted it to, that we wouldn't be up here. So thanks a lot.
Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
Okay. Thanks. That's a good question.
Anyone else?
Next question.
I'm slowly learning. How do you look to address bringing in like namespaces and auto-loading functions right now? I was looking at it last night because the Azure SDK, sorry to mention it, is using namespaces, and we're trying to conform to PSR 0, PSR 1, PSR 2, just depending on what we can do. So I was trying to use like import to import particular classes, but it would be a lot easier to just import an autoloader. Is there a way to do that today? And if not, how do you look to support that in the future?
So the question was that how would we support namespaces, or how are we going to better support namespaces in Cake 3? And how do we support them now, I guess?
Well, can you support them now in a way?
So I think as far as using namespaces in your own app, we don't disallow that. The core doesn't do that right now. And in the future, we will do a much better job of supporting that. As far as like auto-loading code, I think you wrote a hip-hop plugin before.
Yeah.
And then that uses a class map to do class auto-loading. But you could implement your own class autoloader that would sort of override app uses in Cake applications. So you could have done that in 1.3. You can do that in 2.0. It'll just be a little bit better in 3.0, I guess.
But currently using namespaces wouldn't work, would it? Like on models, it wouldn't work.
Why not?
I'm asking, that's why.
Okay.
I think it
As
should
far as
work.
I know,
It works.
It works.
You can also, if your application comes with an autoloader, like if your libraries come with an autoloader, you can register the autoloader, and then that runs independently of the Cake one. Because you can register as many autoloaders as you want.
If you use bindings between two models, how do you specify? Because it's actually Cake loading the model. How do you specify the namespace? It's not going to find it.
That is true.
And it doesn't work.
With the class name.
Oh yeah, you can give the class name. That's right.
Yeah.
If you give,
Oh, that's me?
yeah, if you give the class name, you can give a full namespace class name.
Yeah.
And it doesn't break out the class registry?
Yeah, it's just new name of the class.
What?
You know the class name where you set the associations?
Yeah.
It goes to the class registry. You just get that string and says new string. So if you have the full path to the class, you just try to load it, it goes to the autoloader, and that's it. So to address your question, I think you were asking about autoloading. Yes, there are solutions to autoload anything that comes from a namespace. So if a class is not on the scope to be loaded, it goes to an autoloader, and we already have one, actually, that one did, I think. And you don't need to import anything. You just need to declare use the class and then just instantiate it, and it will go to the autoloader. But we're going to do things a bit different in 3.0 from what other PHP projects are doing with namespaces, is that we'll keep our plugin notation, which means that if you want to address a class in another plugin or in another part of the application, you won't need to type the full path of namespaces. You just need to say plugin.name, and we'll resolve that for you automatically. Or you can use the full name, of course, but we'll try to make things as much clear as possible for users coming from 2.0, and I'm quite happy with that because I really, really, really dislike the backslash operator. So as less as I need to type it, that's gonna be awesome.
Does that answer your question, I guess? Okay, thanks.
Next question.
What time is it?
Trying to make up the next
So 5 minutes.
Brett.
One more question. On the basic CRUD operations, the add and edit are so similar that I tend to like to combine them. I know that some people do that, call it upsert or something, because basically it doesn't have an ID or not. And if it doesn't have an ID, well then it's the same action, but Okay, so I guess my question is there any plans to support that officially and to combine those two functions into one?
We already, so the question is there any plans to support add and edit as one action? Maybe. It's already supported. Like if you do it in your application, Cake's not gonna be like,
Right. Just one
naughty developer exception. Like that's not gonna happen. You can do it. It just doesn't come out of bake. That's all.
Right, you have to change the skeletons and then.
Yeah.
everything.
Yeah.
Is that
That's perfectly fine. If that's the way you.
standard way going forward?
Yeah, if you want to use your own bake templates, like if you want to only have upsert, then that's totally up to you. We have some preconceived ideas of like how you could build an application with add and edit. But if you don't need that, then yeah, they are generally the same. But sometimes you have a different create form versus an edit form. Sometimes, so we don't know. We just guess.
There might be some things you want to do.
If you check plugins.kphp.org, there are some CRUD plugins that you can use. And it's basically a component that you can include, and it will do all the bake related stuff in your controllers. And that one already has the add and edit merged into one, so you just need to use one template in your views. So it's already there. KPHP is not forcing you to not doing it.
Sure.
People is doing it.
Right.
You can just support it in your own application by just calling set action. Remember set action from the workshop? It's basically that. So it's just one line. So I think that as much more support than that, it's hard. Like too much automatic, it's going to hurt you.
That's really one of the biggest misunderstandings with CakePHP is people do not think it's flexible enough. And you can throw any idea that you have at us right now, and we can tell you a way that it can be done or how it can be overridden in the core. That's what our CakePHP channel is for. If you need help like that, jump in. Don't do it in an arrogant way, but try to get somebody's attention, ask your question, and somebody's going to give you a way to do it. I think we are one of the most flexible frameworks out there, but I'm a little biased toward it too, so. Just a little.
Does that answer your question?
Yes.
Yay.
Next question.
Are you ever going to default recursive to -1 since containable? So
We're just gonna get rid of recursive. I hate that thing. I don't think recursive is gonna make it to 3. I don't think containable is gonna make it either. Jose and I have talked many times about just making containable part of the model. So instead of having to add a thing in to get containable, you just, when you're doing your query, you just specify which joins, which associations you want to be loaded in to preload them, or you'll be able to lazy load them. A lot of frameworks, the way you do it is you just access the association, and then it goes, oh, I gotta go get all that stuff from the database, and then it does a query. So you can either do it where you can incur an end query cost, or you can do it where we can try and pre-join as much data as you can. Obviously, some types of queries, you can't join all of the associations that you would want. Even now, Containable doesn't do like a complex join across many tables. But yeah, we're either going to do lazy loading associations or support like an eager load association system. Recursive should hopefully go away.
I don't even know why I implemented it that way when I originally did. Everybody seems to hate it, but I know it had something to do with, I was trying to work on the auto-loading and doing lazy loading with associations, but because PHP 4 wouldn't allow me to do the things I needed to, I just kind of, did some things to automatically set and pull the associations that would be needed. I came up with the concept of the associations at like 2:30 in the morning one night, so honestly, I don't remember why I do it, but obviously everybody hates it, so. Take your app model and just set recursive equals 1 and net minus 1, and you can shut it off on all your models, so that'd be the easiest way to override it currently.
Does that answer your question?
Yes. Next question.
Are there any plans to support
Natively as in build. So the question was, are there any plans to support document-based databases natively in the core? Right? I don't have any. It's already very doable. There are several plugins for MongoDB and several plugins for, what's the other one? Couch. Pardon? Yeah, there's already data sources for Couch and for Mongo and for Elasticsearch and Redis. So I don't think there'll be one. I'd like to get rid of more of the data sources in core, but no, I actually can't get rid of any more. We got rid of all of them. Damn it. I don't want to add Oracle back.
Separate them out to separate data source repo, which is, we're trying to get the community to maintain those more.
Yeah, I'm definitely not an expert in MongoDB, so for me to maintain a Mongo driver would be really difficult. I know SQL databases and I hate them, and I don't want to have to learn Mongo and then hate that too. So I can just pretend that Mongo is really nice because I know SQL databases all suck. Like every single one of them sucks, except for SQLite. But I love that. I love SQLite until you have to do concurrency and then it's fail. Yeah, maybe Mongo. Jose has something.
Yeah, there are no plans, but if anyone is willing to contribute that to the core and maintain it, I'll be happy to accept that. But what we're trying to do actually is just have a good abstraction where people can hook in and implement any data source more easily without having to emulate models trying to do SQL stuff, which is the problem that we have now. And hopefully that will help a lot for other people to just fit in some classes or just swap our entire ORM and use something like Doctrine Mongo or whatever they want to use. So no, there are no plans, but we might change our mind. If I was to make any data source that is document-based, it would be Elasticsearch. But I don't think that's the scope for a framework, to be honest.
Yeah, it's just because you and I really like it.
Exactly.
Does that answer your question? No smiley helper.
You don't want the smiley helper?
No, go away. Is that all the time, James? Are we at time? Yay, that's it. If you have any other questions, of course, you don't have to just limit them to this. You can always come and just talk to us. We're people. We don't eat people. I eat, but not people. You can always just grab us and just ask us. We're always on, well, not always, but we're often on IRC or on the mailing list. So you can always ask questions there as well. Thanks, everyone. Hopefully this wasn't boring.